Well, good morning, everybody. As we start this last weekend of January 2026, I want to pick up on a couple of big stories we're following this week, but I want to get into the longer range discussion here in a few moments about what I think might be driving the pattern and what ultimately could guide us into the rest of February and March. And I think we're going to have to pay close attention to persistence with that. So the two big stories right now are the massive winter storm that could hit parts of the Carolinas, maybe rolling some snow up along the East Coast this weekend, and then the brutally cold air that's going to get far south, almost all the way down into southern Florida. The question I'm going to ask, though, if we just look at this, is that we've kind of divided the country here with much better access to Arctic air east, and much more mild and stagnant weather since we started this new year. And if you look just over the last few weeks, I mean, this goes from the 14th of January now to the 29th of January. This has been a bit more amplified, right? And we got some places in like the Mississippi Valley. Look at this whole thing. And then getting back over here toward the Arkansas, the Red River, and then to central Texas. You see a lot of these numbers approaching, the top of the historic distribution on temperatures, meaning when you look at these ranks, this is some of the coldest air we've seen in a very long time. And it's going to ask, how long is it going to last and what's it going to look like? Because it's been a mess cleaning up after last weekend's winter storm system that just ripped through this part of the country, including a massive ice storm further to the south, because we've not had any break in the temperatures. And we still have a lot of people without power because of Mother Nature's reluctance to help by melting some of this ice as across some of our major metropolitan areas. Meanwhile, extremely stagnant pattern west, mild across much of the southwest, getting into California, and I'll show you in a few minutes just how dry it's been in the northwest. But I was looking here just at a couple things on satellite yesterday. We were getting a few clear patches in the clouds east of the Rockies, and I was trying to see where that snowpack sat underneath it. And again, you can see all the way through Arkansas, Tennessee, Mississippi, where we still see the snow. Of course, there's a significant icing event that is rolling that, of course, went right through this corridor. Actually came out of more of Texas than that, but our cleanup's going to continue. But I was curious more about ice on the river system. So I went out and grabbed some higher resolution satellite data. This is a satellite called MODIS, an instrument called MODIS on a satellite or platform that's called EOS Aqua. And it's got some imagery on the 29th. And I was just curious, could we zoom in far enough to where I could see how much of the Mississippi River at certain locations had ice on it? And it's just not high enough resolution, right? The resolution kind of dies here. But as I kind of just looked through all of this, and you can see look at this through Memphis and south of there, just snow on the ground, ice around this. It's pretty nasty. But I've come up a little farther because I was reading a few things about what's going on in the mid and upper Mississippi. So, for example, in St. Louis, the huge drop in, 10-foot drop in the levels of the Mississippi River ahead of this Arctic blast, mainly driven by a wind event out of the north. But I was able to pull up some satellite data from a much higher resolution satellite called Sentinel. And here we are. This is Missouri, and this is Illinois. And you see how there's just a lot of, it looks like gray on the river. Now, unfortunately, this browser is slow. So if I start to zoom out, it'll catch up here. But I wish it was much, much faster. But these are huge images. So again, to show you where, there's Cape Girardeau, and as it's loading more data, we were just zoomed in here seeing how much of the river has now got massive chunks of ice floating in it, which can be a hazard for pushing anything up and down the river this time of year. And of course, because of all that Arctic air, coming back to this, so much of the river is just frozen with huge chunks of ice. I saw some pictures of large pieces of ice going past St. Louis by the arch there. So we just need to observe these things and try to understand what it is doing to one of our best assets in terms of a travel corridor for getting goods and services and grain particularly, and fertilizer up and down the river. So just a couple things to think about as we go through this. Now this morning, just a hair before 6 a.m., our all hazards weather map is highlighting some of the major risks. So just in the white or the black outlined but white counties here, what we're looking at is the cold weather advisories. Here's a massive area of winter storm watch and warning. And then here, this is all extreme cold watch. And we're going to keep an eye on the fact that they have now issued freeze watches all the way down to the southern tip of Florida, right down here. And just thinking this through, understand also we do have a winter weather advisory coming out of Montana into North Dakota. There's a clipper actually several that are going to follow this coming in through this quarter, but we need to take a closer look at what's happening here. So where's that air coming from? I just used the high split model. It's from NOAA. Trace back over the last 10 days where the air at Disney, just had to pick a spot, where the air at Disney is going to be coming from on Sunday. And you can see that 10 days ago it began life from a larger source region deep into the Arctic, North Atlantic, the Canadian archipelago, and it's just been coming farther and farther to the south with each day. So the updated frost risk map, again, just to reiterate this map, anything you see shaded in darker gray is where the minimum temperatures are expected to be 35 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. So it's not 32, it's 35. And we are expecting this is all along the Gulf Coast and south. It's maybe only the southern tip of Texas that can escape this in this particular situation. So the minimum temperatures, I tend to rely on the National Digital Forecast Database. This is a forecast put together by the National Weather Service. These are this morning's minimum temperatures. This would be Saturday morning's min temperatures. A lot of single digits here, but look at the warm-up in Montana. That's still very mild in the west. But we're going to pay attention to what happens from Saturday morning to Sunday morning, where now I've got Orlando at 24. We've got Jacksonville at 20, Tallahassee at 19, and Miami 35, 36 degrees. Now, at the same time this is going on, it'll be on the backside of a winter storm event that's coming up right off the coast here of North and South Carolina. And so there's plenty of cold air wrapping around the backside of this, but I think it's important just to show this. I always find it fascinating. Jacksonville's minimum temperature is the same as central North Dakota in this case. And there it is. You can see it. That's persistence, which is what's going to be the most challenging thing to break away from in any subseasonal forecast we're about to discuss here. Let's keep going, though. This is Sunday morning. Monday, another cold one in the south and east. Behind this, where all the snow should be, we're going to see temperatures in the teens, very, very cold, possibly getting into single digits, certainly into here north into the northeast. And then as we go forward, this is now Tuesday and Wednesday. We're watching a warm-up happening across a broad section of the country midweek next week. But we're going to just call into question once again, is it a short-lived event with this warm-up that's happening, or is it going to be something we can maybe count on a little more for some more mild conditions? Now, the neat part about the way that the atmosphere is shaping up with this next system is going to be driven by the mid-level height pattern. Okay. Now, I say driven by, but understand the mid-level height pattern is a consequence of the surface level temperatures. They work in tandem, one reinforcing the other. It's a kind of a positive feedback loop. And what I'm seeing here as we go through the rest of the day today into tomorrow, there are actually a pair of short waves, one here and one here. And what is fascinating about this particular low is that it even gets in there. Look at that. There's some negative tilt to this. See this? See the tilt of that trough? And that means that as it forms here, we would like, well, let me rephrase that. It would be interesting meteorologically if that low took on this tilt and the wave brought the low right along the coast. We call those nor'easters. But the problem with this whole setup and why it will likely open itself up just to be pushed offshore much further than riding the I-95 corridor is two things. In the upper levels of the atmosphere, you can see the winds coming around this, right? It's clearly not making the hard turn here. It's over open ocean. And secondly, it's what's near the surface up there. And then the Canadian Maritimes, the Great Lakes, the Northeast, there's just not high pressure. And that's what you need in order for this system to be forced. So just think about it. At the surface, there's a low. If you put a high pressure cell up here, the flow's coming around the high like this, around the low like that. Do you see how it's forcing flow in this direction? We're just missing that in this particular setup. So the system comes out, and it probably just stays too far offshore to produce a massive winter storm system up the Northeast, but there will still be snow. And Matt was highlighting what some of the models were sharing, and I'm going to give you an update on that in a few moments. Take note, though, behind it, there is a little clipper that's going to sneak through, and more coming, because this seems to be a more permanent feature. Look at that high sitting right there, just kind of dominating the flow in the western states. Now, given that we are expecting to see significant snows in the Carolinas, maybe even parts of Georgia, then on the other side in Virginia, I wanted to pull up a map that was showing the days since the last blizzard warning. And so the number in each climate district here, or group of climate districts, is showing you how many days it's been. So just a reminder, remember last January 21st, we had the blizzard warning down here in these southern parishes in Louisiana. Where there's dashes, we just don't have record, right? It's so if the winds get cranking here, which there is a strong possibility of having strong enough winds with snow lasting more than 3 hours, reducing visibility below a quarter of an inch, or a quarter of a mile. A quarter of an inch would be nuts. We could have whiteout conditions and a blizzard warning showing up here. I would not rule that out. But while I'm here, I do want to go back and do this. So this is just a great website put out by Iowa State. I'm going to do, this is days since last watch warning. Why don't we do, let's do, I don't want to do cold weather. I want to do, let's do freeze. This could be interesting. Days since a last freeze watch. Let's put it at a watch. And what I'm doing here is, where did I put it? Yeah, see the freeze watch down here? Now, oh shoot, I guess it will just give the map will show no days, won't it? Darn it. I was curious before the freeze watch that's down in southern Florida, how long it has been since a freeze watch. And it, of course, says 0. Dang it. I thought it might say, 3, 4, 5, 600 days since that has happened. But now the freeze watch is in place. Maybe we could have used southern Texas as an example. I don't know. Okay, sorry about that. Just looking through this. You're going, well, why are the numbers so high up here? We get cold up here all the time. They don't have to put a watch out for a freeze event up north. Okay, sorry. Thought that'd be more interesting. Back to the main story, though. By the time we get into midday Saturday, see how the low is trying to get offshore? I would need this there, and that would roll this thing right up the coast. So I wanted to point that out. And by the way, here's the clipper that follows. So let's assess. Let's dig into a few different models and see what this thing's going to do, because it's going to be highly disruptive in this area. I want to show you vorticity first. Here comes the wave. Now remember, it's going to take on this beautiful closing and negative tilt as we work our way into Saturday evening. But that wave just ejects. And all you have to remember with this, as you look at these maps, I think the simple thing to remember is watch where the high vorticity, which is shaded, is moving. So you know how the flow goes through like this, right? You can follow the contours to figure out the flow of the atmosphere. Your best upper level support, I'll put a D over it for divergence in the mid and upper levels of the atmosphere, is always going to be on the downwind side of where you're blowing high vorticity, so positive vorticity to where there's negative. We call it vorticity advection. So now you see, look behind it. See the little short wave there? Where's it going? That way. So you expect rising motion, snow out ahead of it because it's so cold. So this is where that low goes. And I'm just going to go back and forth to show you how close we were to a pretty historic blizzard situation up the East Coast if this was just here. Okay? Now, does anything else follow it? We are keeping an eye. This is next Wednesday into Thursday at another one. See it right there? I mean, out west, just ridge. That's why I'm not talking much about it. Flow's doing this, so there's clippers, but the little wave sneaks out here again. And this is next Thursday to Friday, and that wave tries to sneak up the coast as well. We are just missing the help of big areas of high pressure in this area. Otherwise, it'd be just a nor'easter festival going into the end of this month and the start of February. Now, let's bring it back to precipitation type and intensity, just to kind of get a benchmark here. So as we're playing through the rest of the day today, we will see by tonight already snow coming over the Appalachian Mountains. And then this is as we get into the day on Saturday. So by midday Saturday, widespread snow. National Weather Service is alerting to whiteout potential with this because you can see the spacing of the isobars indicating the winds. And then the low just builds and deepens rapidly offshore. So what I'm saying is, had that vortmax made its way up the coast, all of this would have been along the I-95 corridor. Oh, by the way, the vortmax that's coming out of Canada into the northern plains, see the snow out ahead of it? That's what we're watching for here. That's just kind of, we call it Dynamics 101. So that low, goodness gracious. I mean, this could still hit Cape Cod, as Matt talked about, but it's just too far offshore. It just missed. Now, little clippers come through. I'll play this a little faster now because we're getting out there till next Tuesday, Wednesday. See this little guy here? That's that next wave coming through. And the models are attempting to deepen it by Wednesday into Thursday. And it's shown up in several of the last model runs. Its placement has been different each time, but this is the newest data on Friday morning. Now notice the west just cannot seem to get into this action. It's just clipper after clipper after clipper and cold Arctic highs coming in behind it. But some of the models, again, this one being, the latest European, once again try to put something into the northeast, and they're trying to bring a system closer to the west coast. Does that front get there? Does the pattern really open up and start to bring something more meaningful across the country? You can't trust a 300-hour forecast from a single model. It's going to be a disaster every time. But we do need to look at a couple other variables here. So let's go from this over to just total QPF, or quantitative precipitation forecast, being predicted by the European. And as we play it out, let's just see how much moisture is in this whole thing. So even with the potential for some significant snows, I mean, here in the Carolinas, we're not talking about much more than, 0.6 of a total amount of liquid in this. So, I mean, it's not as though this is one of those mega saturated systems we're talking about. Keeping this going, let's just see. There's the next one. See it coming out of Arkansas into the Delta and spreading east. And as I just play it out there, see that stuff in the west? We have to seriously break down the western ridge before we even get anything close to that. So we're going to look at it, but that's about it. Let's now go over to snowfall. All right. So here we go. And start this plan. All right. That's the newest Euro model forecast. And there's the second little wave coming through. And this is what we've got, just playing this out as far as we can. Now, again, that stuff you see happening in the west, which is desperately needed. I'm talking North Platte, South Platte, the snow here, what we need in the, in the Colorado Basin, which we've discussed a lot of last week. I'm just going to tell you, be skeptical of seeing this. But we do need to keep an eye on these numbers over here. And just to kind of give you the latest on the European models, we zoom in. There you go. You can kind of see this is I'd call it a 5 to 8 inch snowfall event. What is very challenging is what's going to be the snowfall amounts here, or how far back into Georgia we're going to see this. So I'm going to rely in a few minutes on forecast data from their National Weather Services to show you that. I do want to pull up one last thing here. So let's zoom this back out real quick. And I'm curious about winds. So let's go over to wind gusts. And there we go. Get a national view. Okay. Yeah, look at these winds. So this is why I think we could possibly find ourselves with a blizzard warning at some point. If the snow comes, the visibility is reduced, and it can last for at least 3 hours. But that's going to be a deep low off the coast. And look at the strong winds on the backside. Talk about stagnant. Look right there. That's just a quick outlook of your wind over the next 60 hours or so. All right, from here, we need to, of course, expand this out. I do want to show you some of the high-res models because I think it's important to see those in addition to our low-res. And so this is what the high-res NAM is doing. And where are we in time? This is Friday night, getting into early Saturday morning. And our two main features are the Clipper and this deep low off the coast. But we have to have a much closer examination of that low off the coast. So I'm going to zoom in if you don't mind, going down to the high-res NAM in the southeast. And here we go. So this is through 8 p.m. tonight, Eastern time, getting into early tomorrow morning by 6 a.m. And the NAM is also putting out some ice around Wilmington here, so be aware of that. And I just think the winds are going to pick up here, and with the heavy, almost convective snow giving us whiteout risk, we've got a good chance here at getting a blizzard warning in this area. It's just something to watch. I also noticed this, and you direct your attention to Tampa. This is now early Sunday morning. The model is trying to put down some snow showers in the Tampa Bay area. Can you see that? In fact, let's just go look. What's the model say for total snow? Look at that showing up down there. Now, the NAM is very aggressive on this. It's got a foot of snow here. We do need to assess if that is possible in this particular situation. So if we have a look at the model comparison first, okay, GFS versus European. Here we go. I will make a very important note that earlier in the week, the GFS was putting down 18 to 20 inches of snow, and it has since backed off significantly. And this is what the storm system looks like through 6 a.m. Sunday. It's offshore, and now both models are very reluctant to hit this area with heavy snow. I got a little clipper behind it, the system hitting Washington, coastal Washington and Oregon, which is very, very dry this month. And that's what I've got. Now, do both models have that system next Wednesday? All right, they're showing up. Much different placement. I mean, look at the snow in southern Wisconsin, northern Illinois versus Missouri and southern Illinois. So the waves are not well timed, just 120 hours out. but it does move across the country. So there is at least some agreement that next Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, there is another system rolling through here. Timing, placement, everything is going to be a mess with it. But the West, man, we've got to get this pattern to break down in the western United States. All right, total snow. This is the European 7-day forecast. And once again, now, heaviest snows in the new European are off, maybe just clipping Cape Cod. But pretty widespread 4 to 8 inch snowfall event here. And then that secondary system that comes through because it's farther to the south than the GFS, you have the snow here. What about the AI forecast? This is the 7-day AI forecast. Look at how much more snow it's putting down in the coastal regions of North Carolina, versus the coastal plain and the Piedmonts, and it's got big snows in the Appalachian Mountains or the Blue Ridge Mountains here. West, nothing. And then we get over to the GFS, and once again we see bigger snowfall, in places, but that more northerly track, it's keeping too much of this farther to the north here, and that again we kind of saw that when looking at the placement of those two different lows. Okay. I do want to show you the blend of models. This is the National Weather Service, and the blend is just the oddball. It's just, look at how much more it's trying to bring into this part of the Northeast. And it has been, in my opinion, the most aggressive snowmaker of all of the models. And I have honestly had to discount it at times. It seems to be just, it seems to be finding stuff that's not there. So let's just monitor it. Remember, clippers are coming through here, and not a whole lot of extra support in the atmosphere to bring in any sort of good precipitation into the west. So I did tell you I wanted to show you the National Weather Service maps. I love these. You go to weather.gov, click on your location, and you can get their weather story graphics. And right now, this is the one that's out of Atlanta. So they have got, over here on this side of Atlanta, the chances of 3 to 5 inches of snow. Why? It's so cold that the liquid to snow ratios are higher. And if we go from there into the forecast graphics for South Carolina, just take a look at the upper right-hand corner of this. Again, coming out of Georgia here into this side of South Carolina, we now see them going up to 5 to 9 inches. And they're bringing in 4 to 7 into Columbia. From there, we can go have a look at the National Weather Service out of Raleigh. Actually produces a PDF report you can get. And if you look kind of in this area, we've got pretty widespread 6 to 8 inches. So they're talking about better, it says most locations in central North Carolina, 4 to 8. A couple of areas of up to 10, maybe more. It says reasonable high-end totals could see 12 to 14. And then I also pulled this one up, which is right there along the coast. This is the probability of 8 inches of snow, so that like 75 to 80% chance. And they're talking about whiteout conditions. All right, so that's the risk of that blizzard warning. So when you see this, sometimes it makes these maps, my probability maps I get from the European model, it feels like they kind of missed the boat, right? Like, wait a minute, it only says the probability of 3 inches is, 50 to 80%. If I step it up to 6 inches, like it almost goes away. You're saying, but the National Weather Service, I said, I understand. The National Weather Service offices know their local territory. They understand the model biases. So when I give you these big, broad brush, big view of the country using these, it's just for you to see the potential, not to examine the exact amounts. All right. What I do know about the European model, though, if you look at this, the chances of places that are going to stay dry through the next, let's go beyond that. Let's go all the way out there to 240 hours. This is the probability it's staying under 1/10 of an inch of liquid equivalent. And this is so much of the Central Plains getting over toward Missouri, all of the Four Corner states, which we need the snow here. It's back into this part of Alberta, northern Montana, which I've been discussing all week with some folks here in the Golden Triangle, how dry it is. And it's really only parts of the Pacific Northwest that get a shot at bringing in some moisture. So from there, I just want to talk about why. What's driving this? And I told you at the beginning, I'm so worried about persistence. Persistence has been a highly variable Pacific ridge. We've had it living in two different places. So if the flow goes over this or it goes over that, guess where it comes through? And we've seen trough and trough. That's what's been going on across the Atlantic. And this highly variable Pacific ridge, if it does not break down anytime soon, then any of the long-range forecasts I show you, if the ridge wins the persistence battle here and it just sticks around, I'm just talking about all this right here, then anything we think we see in the MJO, any changes we get in the North Atlantic, the Arctic Oscillation, the polar vortex changes, I just don't think it can outdo this. So I get concerned about it because I look out there at day 10, and guess what? There's still something here. and a trough there, right? You're going, well, show me beyond that. Okay, yeah, the model's like, yep. Look. Let's just drop in a trough, something. Get the pressure to lower here. And what have we talked about for the last 15 days? Well, the MJO is trying to go into phase 2, phase 3, which drops troughs of low pressure here. But I'm going to be so skeptical of this until I finally know where this thing is going to be. So I show you that just to bring these maps up. Most forecasts continue into week 2 with the Clipper track. See it there? But the midsection of the country, starting from California all the way to Virginia, if you do not get flow coming in this direction and instead it's doing this, and we are going to have a very difficult time waking this pattern up to do something meaningful. And here's the issue with all of it. Since the start of winter, December 1 to January 29, even though there's snow on the ground here, even though we had a system come through, these precipitation ranks are very, very high, meaning that it's dry. And this goes all the way to the coast, goes to Florida, goes down to southern Texas, and look at Nebraska. This is a major concern for where the North and South Platte River snowpack, what it looks like right now. And remember, if you just go from the start of January, the stagnant pattern in the Northwest has really brought in significant midwinter drought problems. And this, like, oh, that's a relief. There's been some, good moisture coming through there. And that you're not on the drought monitor in Kansas. Yet I can still see that subsurface soil moisture is lacking in a big way across this section of the country. It's here in pockets of the Columbia Basin toward the Palouse, pushing up against the Blue Mountains. Look at the Willamette Valley. And then over here where this snow, this big winter storm's coming through, bring it on, but we got to melt it. We got to be able to keep it. So I think all of that through, and just want to remind you that right now we still have 67% of the lower 48 in some form of drought. And over the last 4 weeks, you can see in these degradation colors where we've been deepening that drought with time. I cannot shake away the risk of that. Now, I've been watching the models carefully. Here's the next week. This is getting out into week 2. So we are anticipating drier air to follow in these main corridors. But watch. The farther out we go in the forecast, past mid-month, the models want to wake it up in the west. They want to bring something back into this area. And that is the model being, I think, consistent with itself because it's trying to give us that MJO phase 2, phase 3. You're going to remind me again, troughs. It just tries to bring in troughs here versus where we are, which is ridges here. It's trying to break this pattern. And therefore, if you look at a 30-day forecast, like Matt did yesterday, and just slide it out, this is now the 30 days ending on March 6th, the 30 days ending on March 10th, the 30 days ending on March 15th. And notice it's trying to wake this all up, risking drought developing here or continuing to develop here. And I'm just going to be skeptical of it, as Matt is too, until something really breaks in these massive waffling Pacific ridges. Could it be helped by the polar vortex? I don't think so. I think the polar vortex is actually reinforcing the fact that Arctic air is being driven into this area, which means troughs here, ridges there. Got it? But the polar vortex is displaced. We do see that the forecast of it all the way through the beginning of March is expected to be below average, meaning the polar vortex will continue to be a supplement to the risk of it being cold. And if we just watch these temperature anomalies, this is every 5 days. This is every day. So this would be today's temperature anomalies. This is getting into the 31st, the 1st, Groundhog's Day. We get into the 2nd, the 3rd, the 4th. There's a lot of warm air coming here. But got to remember, 27 degrees above average is still well below freezing. We're going to have cold air still, despite it being warmer than average. But we can't seem to break the northeast, the east away. This is February 7th, February 8th, February 9th. The models just continue to lock the northeast into some brutal, brutal cold. Now, if I had a temperature gradient like this and cold and high pressure here, I'm going to say, wow, February 10th, 11th, 12th, if this happens, you're going to get a Miller B coming across and rolling up the coast. But my goodness, we've been trying to predict something like that for weeks, months, it feels like. The temperatures, when you look at just a 5-day sliding anomaly, watch, here's the next 5 days. There's day 5 through 10. So yeah, you've got some mild air coming in here, but it's just reinforcing the ridge. And day 10 through 15, I would have to see a complete reversal where this warmth comes here and the cold returns there to drive lows that come out of the southwest. And models keep saying that they want it to happen, and it just doesn't. That's why I started the day talking about persistence. So here we go. New European model is stuck on it. That's week 2. Now we get into week 3, week 4. Now we're into the beginning of March, and we just see a lot of cold air getting left in the models. This is a bias. This is real. I mean, it could be real in the models is the way to think of it. All right, global circulation. We watched for months strong trade winds doing this and this. These trades have backed off. This La Niña is waning. It's still kicking and flinging on its way out. But if you look in January here, look at the temperatures, which were so strong in October, so much colder than average, into November. This is when our La Niña was really pushing hard. But as we get further into December, when it reached its peak, and then get into January, watch it fade here first. Ready? January 10th, 11th, 12th, right there. And as that faded, so did all the action in North Pacific, which was cold here and warm there. That's a major PDO signal. One of you asked me, hey, talk about the PDO. There's a reason why I haven't. Because I look at the PDO and I'm like, holy smokes, look at this for the last few years, just diving down here into these negative PDO values. You zoom in, and this has been very, very negative for a while. We typically link negative PDO up with La Niña. But I come back to my ocean temperatures in December, January, we kind of lost that signal here. And therefore, I've not been using it as a main predictor for this winter. That's why I haven't been talking about it. So I've been using these analog years, and I want to show you something crazy about analog years. You know the ones I've liked are 18, 14, and 9. Matt showed these yesterday too. And we expect the second half of February to pick up with activity here. We run the risk of being drier in the plains, drier in the southeast. Can the Northwest grab some more moisture versus California? That's what history says. We tend to have plenty of access to cold air, and I would modify this to say that all of this area is probably going to stay cooler given the latest forecasts. But the question about these analogs is, how do they do when they get into March, and what happens when you look at the years individually? So if we just go the same analogs into the month of March, this is the precipitation composite. And you pick up some patterns, like the Northwest goes over wetter. Northern tier of the country has more winter storms, but we're drier in a corridor here. Wetter down by the Gulf Coast. Okay, we just stitched them all together. Temperatures, it's a bit more of a coherent story. There you go. That's that risk I mentioned of this whole region staying cooler. But I want to show you this. When you look at all of the years that had a La Niña in winter and went into an El Nino by spring and summer, they tended in March to be active here and drier there and maybe drier into the south and east. Why? Big ridge set up here, pumping systems through this area. California, you tended to be a little wetter than average too. Temperature-wise, okay, colder west, colder north, more mild to the south. We've not seen this yet though, right? We have seen our dividing line not like this, but like this. So even though these other years are years that you could call an analog, you need to see this. These are just the most recent. So I've got, okay, there's 2018. That's a big one. 14 and 9. Those are the three I've kind of pulled out. But I also showed you 23, 06, and 02. And I just stopped at the most recent 6 analogs that had La Niña winter conditions and then El Nino summer. All right? Look at the difference. Is there any spot that's consistent? Well, maybe Texas. In 4 out of the 6, it is warm. But the other 2 weren't. And what about precipitation? These are the precipitation patterns from these 6 most recent analogs from my analog package. None of them are strong. And that's why I got a little bit of a chip on my shoulder about forecasting right now, trying to predict this spring, because I love it. I'm like, let's just show them the blended look. That's what we think March might look like. But you got to remember that when we blend them all together, we're blending this. And that's where the inconsistency comes from. And that's why most of us meteorologists realize as we mature and get better and better at forecasting that we have to be extremely skeptical of anything long range. And if we start swinging for the fences, you're going to strike out. Stick to the 2 weeks you got ahead of you. Watch the pattern, understand persistence, and more often than not, you can do a better job going into the future. So that's why I began this all with persistence. Okay. All right, let's finish it up South America. No doubt about it, we've been getting drier in pockets of southern Brazil and this section of Argentina. We've talked about it all week. If we look at the last 7 days, also drier in those same areas. We've seen better precipitation west and south and then through this corridor. And that's exactly where the models want to keep it. West and south and through this corridor through the next 14 days, leaving this region much drier. Southern Brazil, parts of Paraguay, Uruguay, and this section of Argentina. That's the European model. Here's the GFS. It's more expansive on that dry region. I believe there is a story that's developing here, and this weekend I'm going to an event in Nashville to speak, and I'll be around some pretty smart folks that are monitoring South America much more closer than I am. I will tell you what I learned on Monday. But with that, I'm going to wrap this one up. And hopefully we have a better idea after staring at the weather all weekend to give you a better and clearer picture into February and March. But just remember, on Monday, Groundhog's Day, there's a reason why we have so much mystery in weather forecasting, because it's so complicated and hard to figure out. I'm just curious. I wonder what the groundhog's going to say for spring. Is he going to go after something like this on precip or something like this on temperatures? I don't know. But he should be hibernating, and we're just going to ask him his opinion. We'll see if he bites the guy that pulls him out of the cage. Okay, be safe. Have a good weekend. We'll talk soon. Thanks.